My name is Beth. I'm a dietitian, diabetes educator with Gem Care. So looking forward to chatting with you here today, working with Edwards Healthcare Services on the CoreVantage program. So Edwards handling all the supplies and everything for you. And then we have this extra piece where you can speak with a dietitian quarterly and, just kind of help you brainstorm, give you some ideas to, help with the meal planning piece or, just kind of that management of the diabetes a little bit there. So, all right. So hopefully, I am hoping on your end you can see the screen here. So I am going to double check here and just make sure that you're seeing my screen and not me, hopefully there. All right, very good. So just, kind of our goals today, just kind of the tips and tricks and troubleshooting to get the most of your diabetes devices. Why do we have them? What can we do to make them easier to work with? So if you're using any kind of diabetes technology right now, and gosh knows there's lots of it out there, whether it's a continuous glucose monitor, an insulin pump, a smart pen, an app to help you manage the diabetes, all of these tools can be so incredibly helpful. They also can feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes and can be frustrating if they're not working right. So it's like any technology. If it's working great, great. If it's not working great, then, we sometimes want to just chuck it out the window there. So don't let them frustrate you. So sensors fails, pump fails, at inconvenient times, apps disconnect, alerts feel overwhelming, things don't stick to your body like they're supposed to. All these little things can make technology very frustrating. So hopefully, we'll talk through a few of those things today. So again, just kind of just remembering like what the purpose is of technology is, making sure that it is making your life easier and not harder. And if it's not, what can we do a little bit differently to make it that way? Kind of a quick refresher over, what the purpose is, what some troubles that you may be experiencing, some troubleshooting strategies, the way to optimize those alerts and settings, and then when to troubleshoot versus, going to contact support, calling the company and, seeing like, okay, what can I do? What, maybe it is the device that there's something wrong with it. So all that being said of the overview there, let's talk about, the goal of technology. I'm sorry, I feel like this may be in your way, so I just want to move that out of the way there. What is the goal of the technology? It's to provide that real-time feedback, to improve safety, to take away some of the guesswork, to make better decisions, to decrease the daily management of the daily burden of diabetes management. There's so many decisions that have to be made every day when it comes to diabetes. So if there's any of these things that we can make more automated, and the technology really is coming around to make that more automated, but we have to use it efficiently, and if there is a problem, we have to fix it. So the goal is to help you gain some confidence and consistency. Doesn't have to be perfect, just be better. All right, I'm trying to get my slide to advance there. Like, let's, kind of, if it is a CGM, what is a CGM? The continuous glucose monitor. So, we have a couple big players on the market that, most people are using. It doesn't matter necessarily which brand, the challenges are pretty consistent across the board. Sensor errors or early failures. It's supposed to last 10 days and it's only lasting 5. It disconnects from your phone or the reader. The readings don't feel accurate to you. So, you got to get your glucometer out and check it again anyway. The compression lows, you're sleeping and it's going off all the time and kind of waking you up. So adhesive issues, kind of it's not sticking to your body like it's supposed to. So, there are some things we can do there and we'll talk about that. Connectivity problems, it says you can go 30 feet away from your phone, but you go 10 feet away and it disconnects for you or it just randomly will disconnect. So again, just, kind of working through and not panicking when those problems happen. Alarm fatigue, I feel like whether we're talking about a continuous glucose monitor or a pump, making sure that something isn't alerting you all the time if it doesn't need to be there. So again, just a few, we're going to talk about a few things that we can do to help, manage those things a little bit. Just in regards to the inaccurate readings, different sensors have different things that interfere with them. I think vitamin C and acetaminophen are two big ones. So if you're on high doses or not usually taking them and you are taking them now and you feel like your readings are inaccurate, you definitely want to check with the manufacturing guidelines and see what, kind of what the limits are, what you're looking for. Most of the time, those substances will cause higher readings there. There is the implantable continuous glucose monitor, and that one, more mannitol or sorbitol, especially if it's given intravenously, can really elevate those blood sugars falsely. So, we want to make sure that we're not treating those false highs there with the when we see them there. So just making sure that you're thinking about if your readings all of a sudden change, kind of thinking about like, okay, what am I doing different? Am I taking anything different? Can I do anything different just to make it, to make sure that I'm not giving myself more medication or more insulin than I need to? Realizing too that when we're using these continuous glucose monitors, that the interstitial fluid that it is measuring can be different than the finger stick. So if you are kind of using a finger stick to check, there can be some lag time. I always say think about the continuous glucose monitor as the caboose. It may be following a lot, it's kind of coming in behind. So if your blood sugars are changing rapidly, you might see a big difference between your finger stick and your continuous glucose monitor. So, don't panic necessarily, just, give it a few minutes, test again before you treat to make sure that everything is, where it seems like it is for you there. If you feel like that sensor is giving you the wrong reading, then just, kind of give it a minute to verify what's going on there. So again, think about this, any kind of medication changes that you are taking. If you add a supplement, like I said, the vitamin C can be one that influences the continuous glucose monitor. So if you start a new vitamin or you're taking emergency because you have a cold or something like that, don't discount that those can be making some interferences with your continuous glucose monitor there. Accuracy tips, making sure that you're hydrated. So if you're dehydrated, it can give you some false readings there. So, we got summer coming hopefully soon. So making sure that you are keeping yourself hydrated there. Where the sensor is placed, can make a big difference. So yeah, most of them now are approved for the back of the arm. So if you're using it elsewhere on your body, is it giving you readings that are a little bit different? So just, kind of being mindful of that. Like things like allowing the warm up time, most of these sensors now are pretty straightforward. They tell you when they're warmed up. So, we used to be, you have to give it that 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the sensor, to warm up there. Pressure on the sensor. So if you have it when you're sleeping, if you get into a position where you're putting a lot of pressure on the sensor, sometimes it can give some false lows. So if you get an overnight alarm for a low, but you get up and you move and you see that blood sugar go immediately back up, then, think about like, okay, maybe I was just in a position, same thing, like if you're working or you're doing something where you are putting pressure on that sensor, then it can change the reading. So do make sure that, you give it a second to make sure there. And again, anytime you doubt what the sensor is saying, and I know the goal is to eliminate finger sticks, but you do have to do that finger stick to confirm, kind of what is going on there. Improving sensor adhesion. I think like, again, we all have different kinds of skin. For some people, they can't get the sensors off. For others, they can't get it to stick. So, we're trying to find that happy medium in the middle. You want to always clean and dry the skin thoroughly. So a lot of times, like after a shower is a great time if you can time up those changes. One, most of the manufacturers will recommend if you can wait 12 hours before you get it wet. Again, it does help with the adhesion there. So again, I think about like the season change coming up here when we have warmer, hotter weather, that sensor may tend to come off a little bit more, especially if you perspire more heavily. So kind of thinking about things that you can use things like there's a couple products out there. There's Torbit Skin Tack, there's some skin prep barrier wipes, there's Mastisol, which is a liquid adhesive. You can, clean the skin, apply these adhesives, and then put your sensor on to give it, some extra sticking power. Most of them have an overlay patch that will give some extra protection. So if your sensor comes with an overlay patch, please do use the overlay patch. They are also available like aftermarket. So there are, some fun designs and things like that if you choose. And you may find an aftermarket one that works better than the one that may come with the sensor. Not all sensors come with an overlay patch, so you may have to search on your own a little bit. Rotate your insertion sites regularly. Don't put the sensor in the same spot, especially with these longer wearing sensors now. We're up to 15 days on some of the sensors. So, give that spot a chance to heal if you can change arms. And I know there sometimes you can't. Like, there is something like I was working with somebody yesterday that had a stroke, and the doctor didn't want them to put the sensor on the side of the body that was most affected. So, at least need to move it around on the arm to make sure that you are, not using that same spot over and over again there. So again, hopefully that helps with the sensors, thinking about it a little bit. When it comes to adhesion, there are products. Same thing with taking the sensor off. So sometimes the problem becomes I can't get this off my body, or it hurts when I take it off. So there are, you can use a little bit of baby oil to help remove it. There is an adhesive remover out there called Remove. There's another one, I believe it's called Unisolve, that can help, dissolve that adhesive, and again, just so it's not so hard on your skin. Some people have very sensitive skin. If there's any eczema, anything like that, it can be super uncomfortable to be taking the sensors on and off because of the adhesive there. So just be mindful, thinking about hair on the skin, like do you need to shave that spot? Try to pick the spot with the least amount of hair to put it on if you are, putting it over hair there. So again, making sure, and if you do have to use it in alternate sites, then, do chat with your doctor or the manufacturer about where you're using the sensor. Make sure that, you kind of know the pros and cons of using it in a different place. Kind of switching gears a little bit, or, fortunately or unfortunately, if we are talking about insulin pump troubleshooting, we are also usually talking about continuous glucose monitoring troubleshooting, because the two of them almost always are going together now. That, most of the time when we're using an insulin pump, we are also using a continuous glucose monitor with it. So, kind of making sure that we are, thinking about both of those items. And some of the troubleshooting can be exactly the same when we talk about the adhesion of your infusion sets there. Same products, you can use some extra stick if you need to. Make sure you use a product to help remove the adhesive if you're, having problems getting it off, or it's leaving a little bit of debris behind and irritating the skin, because it's just going to be more uncomfortable if you don't, kind of take care of those things there. Um, when things that happen, the occlusion alarms, is that infusion set, is there a clog per se? So now we have to take it off, and we have to kind of see what we can do to get everything flowing again. You may have to, if that infusion site fails, you may have to change your site a little bit sooner. So making sure that you are aware, carrying some extra materials with you. You can get air bubbles in the tubing. If you see these unexpected high glucose, first thing you want to do is kind of take a look at that infusion set, make sure that nothing has become disconnected. If see fluid around, either around the pump or around the infusion set, of course, the insulin may not be going, being absorbed. At absorption sites, we have to make sure that you're not putting it in any scar tissue. I always recommend that when you are at your primary care provider, your endocrinologist, whoever your medical provider is, make sure they look at those, where you're using your insulin pump. You make sure they're looking at those sites, and checking the skin over to see if there are any, if there's anything going on. You may find that you absorb better on one side of your body and the other. Is there scar tissue? If you've had long-standing diabetes and you've been using an insulin pump for a while, there you can definitely build up some scar tissue there. If you have a surgical history, so many things can contribute to the absorption of the insulin there, the how well the infusion sets stay on. So make sure that you are, don't make it more, we want this product to work well for you, and to help you, not to cause you more stress. So, just kind of being observant of what the skin looks like, where you're absorbing better. When you are rotating your infusion sites, make sure that you are using all the areas possible for you. So again, just kind of some, the quick things, checking your alarms, checking your sites, checking the tubing. If you are having highs that are unexplainable, see what's going on. Charging or battery issues, the pump, isn't fully charged. It's not holding a charge. You need to change the batteries. All those things can, get a little harder to manage the older the pump gets too. I always think of, like it's almost like a cell phone. The longer I have it, sometimes it doesn't hold the charge as long. If you are having any issues, do reach out to the manufacturer to see, is it time for a pump replacement, or, is there something mechanically wrong with the product, so that fix it as soon as possible there. Unexpected rises, again, check your site, check your cannula, check the tubing connection, check the insulin condition. Sometimes those high blood sugars are a result of insulin that may not be viable. Again, with summer coming, or hot, if you're traveling to a hot climate or anything like that, making sure that that insulin storage is correct. You're not storing it at a temperature that's too warm. When you fill, if you're going to be in an extremely hot area for some reason, you may want to, double check how long, most of the pumps protect the insulin, very well. But, do be mindful if you notice changes that are not explainable to you, that the insulin, it could be the insulin in some cases. Alarm fatigue. Both with the continuous glucose monitor and the insulin pump, think about the alarms that are helpful for you and that you need. Not everybody needs to know everything all the time. Lows, of course, you want to be, you want to know when that low is coming, so it's often they are predictable, so we can make a change in insulin management or medication management if needed to prevent that low, so you're not treating a low. Some of the higher alarms, if you have your high alarm set at, 150, do you really, you're out and about, or you're out to lunch, and that that number is going to go up a little bit more, don't torture yourself with having that alarm going off more often than you need to. Maybe, if you're traveling or on your vacation or, something's going on, it's a really hard, stressful time for you. Maybe you bump up that high alarm a little bit to, give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Same thing with your overnights, making sure that you're not setting that alert to, you know, make sure the alerts are appropriate for you, that alarm is not going off so that you are getting good sleep when it's available to you there. Connectivity issues, again, that, always a hard one. Bluetooth disconnects, apps are not updating. So just make sure that you always update your apps whenever you change your, whether we're talking about the continuous glucose monitor or your infusion sets there. Make sure that your pump settings and your continuous glucose monitor settings are up to date. Your apps are all up to date there. Make sure that you are connected to Bluetooth. With sensors, if you have, every time you change that sensor, if you have, delete the old ones so that you don't have, that your phone isn't getting access to lots of different things there. With the Bluetooth, if you have lots of things connected to your phone and the Bluetooth, are there things that you can maybe not Bluetooth so that your continuous glucose monitor and or your pump have priority per se over the Bluetooth? Sometimes if we have, a million things connected via Bluetooth to our devices, it can cause problems. So just making sure that you are, you know, keeping the limits there a little bit. Check with your cell phone provider to see if if you're having issues there constantly. Sometimes the apps themselves, they do crash. So we just have to, kind of, download that app again, restart, make sure you keep your passwords and your usernames handy so that you're not struggling to reconnect if you need to there. Staying within range, kind of, having a pocket or something that you can keep your device in so that, you're not setting that phone down and, walking away from it or getting it way too far from it. Just, kind of keep it on your person if you can. So again, just, making sure that that Bluetooth is connected, making sure that you are close enough to those devices, making sure that you're staying in range. All of those things are going to make your management of your diabetes devices easier and also make your stress level a lot less there, that's for sure. All right. We talked about this a little bit here, the skin rotation or site rotation and skin health. Why you rotate, you prevent scar tissue. It helps the insulin absorption. It reduces the skin irritation. Just, making sure that you're taking advantage if you need a little extra product there, if you need a little extra adhesive, if you need something to remove the adhesive so that you're not changing them more than you have to. They're not, you're not causing yourself more stress when it comes to, having everything in place there. The other thing I always like to mention especially with insulin pumps and, we do have like summer travel season, I think a spring break coming up here. If you're traveling, making sure that you have extra supplies with you. B, if you're changing time zones, sometimes you have to reset your pump when you get to a new time zone. If you are flying, sometimes your glucose readings will be a little bit lower, sometimes you have some connectivity issues. So have some snacks with you, have a backup plan. I always travel with a backup plan, make sure that you have a pump backup plan. If you can take a picture of one, make sure you take a picture of your settings on your pump. If you were, that way, if you have a pump fail or you have to get a replacement pump or you have to, your pump is not working for some reason and you have to go into manual mode where you have to give yourself insulin via injections. You have to have the supplies to be able to do it, and B, you have to have a plan as to what to do. So make sure you have that backup plan available. I always think that at least annually, that is a great conversation to have with your healthcare provider. Make sure you have a backup plan to your pump there. Because again, technology, we love it when it's working, but if there is a failure, we do want to have we do want to have a backup plan. Kind of that question as to when to contact support. If your sensors are failing repeatedly, and there have been some pretty big recalls lately with, some of the continuous glucose monitors. So, kind of do try to keep up on that. I feel like now the apps and everything are alerting you much more when something is going wrong or if your sensor is not doing what it's supposed to do, but never, don't if they're continually failing on you, do reach out to the support, the support. These company everybody wants it to work for you. So make sure that you address if things, don't give up. Just make sure that address what is going on. Pump alarms without clear cause, if there a mechanical malfunction suspected. So, if it's doing something it never did before, then yeah, of course, reach out to your manufacturer, reach out to your contact. I always, again, when it comes to your provider, if you have an endocrinologist, most endocrinologist offices have a contact for whatever pump you are using. So, take advantage of those services. Don't stress out. A lot of them have 24/7 online access now. So, manufacturers want the devices to work for you. So, make sure we get faulty devices replaced there. So, if something is continually happening, do reach out. So, how do you build that confidence with technology? Don't let it overwhelm you. If something goes wrong, remain calm. Just try to, you know, rely on the fact that kind of the patterns of your own body. So if it's something is really off, we do want to look at these devices and make sure that everything is working right. So don't hesitate to reach out to those support systems. We can adjust settings. We can, there's so many things you can do. And when the devices are running smoothly, your life runs more smoothly. So that is always the goal there. Progress, not perfection. Again, things are going to happen. Sensors are going to fail you. Infusion states are going to come out. There are going to be connectivity problems. Readings are not going to match up. So, again, technology's good. You have a support system. I always like to always mention to have if you have a continuous glucose monitor or a pump or the combination of both, do try to have some people in your inner circle that are pretty familiar with it also that so you can, kind of brainstorm or, bounce some ideas off of them or, they can kind of talk you down. Sometimes if blood sugars are going low and you feel that panic and it's just like sometimes you just need a little extra assistance to get everything going. So do take advantage of your support system there also. The kind of the CoreVantage program, how can it help you? The automatic refills, so reminders that your supplies don't run out. Nothing worse than getting you're on your last infusion set and you don't know when things are coming. Make sure that everything is, if you can, make sure it's set up on an automatic refill for you. If you can, or if it works with your insurance company, sometimes 90 days versus 30 days is helpful. Take advantage of the CoreVantage program with Gem Care Wellness, where you can, talk to a dietitian quarterly and, bounce some ideas. And, we're always happy to help you with whatever we can help you with. I always tell people, it's, we're not working directly with your provider. So, sometimes that, we have to kind of go on what you're telling us, but, of course, just kind of getting some ideas, getting some new meal ideas, getting, some talking about exercise, talking about if you're having lows or highs, try to even those things out a little bit. We can connect with your continuous glucose monitors, help, they produce so many good reports and tools to help you manage your blood sugar. So being able to use those effectively and picking out the ones that are best for you. Again, there's lots of information there. Sometimes you don't need to be overwhelmed with all of it. So just picking the ones that work best for you. So key takeaways. Device issues usually have a simple solution. So don't panic. Just let's get through it and get it fixed and get it going. Proper placement and rotation. Do not put your devices in the same places all the time. Make sure that you are rotating your sites as much as possible. Customize those alerts. We not everybody needs every one. There's lots of options out there, age dependent. If you have somebody following you, you may not need all the alerts, just, maybe you only want to know when that blood sugar is low. Don't get overwhelmed by the alert and alarm fatigue. The idea is to make it easier. Personalization, pumps, they come across the gamut. Some of them have lots of things that are changeable. Some have not too many things that are changeable. So, kind of finding the device and the technology that works in your corner. So again, thank you. I am going to check the comment section here, see if there is anything, if you have any questions, couple things you can do. We have the Ask the RD. So if you put your question in here, we will get back to you in a timely manner. Again, I always tell people not for an emergency. If you have a question, a general question that, you can wait, 24 to 48 hours sometimes on the answer, or if it is the weekend, you probably won't hear anything back till Monday. So something that you need answered in a reasonable amount, it doesn't have no emergencies. Okay. Nothing, that needs an immediate answer, but always happy to help you there. The myehcs.com, you can always put questions there. And then of course the 800 number, you can always call in.